The government bond is a bond for which the issuer is a national bond. It is issued with the consent of the National Assembly to raise commercial funds. In particular, those who buy the money by distributing it to the public will receive the principal and interest together.
The national bonds of the Republic of Korea is the commercial project and are divided into three types: government bonds, foreign loans, and national housing bonds. Most of the national bonds in Korea are government bonds, followed by foreign and national housing bonds. There used to be a lot of railway bonds, but they were integrated into the national treasury bonds. The bond is issued with different types, interest and maturity varies depending on the purpose of the bond. It is one of the safest assets in our country. Let me explain about the national value bonds that have the largest share of Korea's national bonds. The National Treasury Bond is covered by the Public Fund for Management of Funds, and the Bank of Korea handles the issue business. There are 1, 3, 5, 10, 20, 30, and 50 years of maturity, and 3-year government bonds are most actively distributed. The National Treasury Bond is the exact obligation of the state to pay back, and if they did, they are innocent. However, it is still possible to publish him because he can earn more than economic losses.
Japanese government bonds have only one type like the United States. It has the second most complicated structure after the United States. Basically, it is similar to the United States, but there is no treasury inflation protected securities, so-called TIPS. TIPS has reflected inflation in its investment capital and paid interest on it, which means that it can't be reflected in interest even if prices go up. The most frequently issued are 5-year notes and bid once a week. In principle, it is a public tender and the remaining one is taken from the Bank of Japan. In addition, we can borrow money without limitation as long as your credit rating is guaranteed. Eventually, they quickbooked and there was a slight decline in credit rating. The bonds issued before World War II were invalidated by the Allies, and the San Francisco Peace Treaty fulfilled its obligation to repay them. Now Japanese debts are meteoric-rise.
Western European countries overcame the scars of World War II and they momentumed in that point, and banks were accumulating money to the limit. Naturally, they are competing to invest in third world countries such as Latin America and Eastern Europe in foreign capital. It was good enough, but North Korea, which ended its high growth period in the 1970s and slowed down its economic growth rate by the bait. North Korea has grown at an advanced rate of 8% until the mid-1960s, but growth is estimated to have alleviated to 4-6% in the 1970s. According to the Wall Street Journal and Reuters news agency, North Korea's debt was 700 million German marks and 500 million Swiss francs, which total about 900 trillion in US dollars. The value has increased. In the 1980s, however, North Korea's economic growth rate dropped from 1 to 3%, and Kim Il-sung, who had no money, had already ended up printing bonds and handing them over to Western European banks. In other words, he didn't have the ability to repay it from the beginning and instead spent it on idolizing Kim Il-sung instead of spending it on economic development like North Korea. I had no intention of paying back in the first place. In the end, North Korea declared depart in 1984 when the Latin America foreign debt crisis was in pursuing no money. In other words, they made an actual splash. Since then, North Korea has not issued even a single interest rate, which means it is always default and its credibility has plummeted. However, government bonds that have already been issued will remain outstanding. In the case of bonds from former communist countries such as China and Russia, the government failed to repay the government's compensation. South Korea also lent a 80 million put loan, but of course it is still behind schedule.
T-bills, T-notes, T-bonds, and TIPS is metric rise. The U.S. Treasury bonds are issued for the printing of U.S. dollar bills and U.S. government financing, and it have great effects. The U.S. government bonds market is open from 9:30 to 16 in eastern U.S. and daylight saving time is applied. The supervisor body is unified as the U.S. Security in the Inception Board, also known as SEC. Its process is very flexible. TIPS was introduced in 1997 and the other three have existed since the 19th century.
Most of the safety assets held by investment banks, hedge funds, and U.S. banks are also T-bills. War bonds made by the United States, including Civil War, World War I, World War II, are all parts of notes class. If T-bonds is held by individual investment for more than 10 years, inheritance and gift tax are not imposed only when water evaporates into direct costs as part of tax benefits. It's called a sample of musk assets because it's a security guarantee for the people of United States.